So this is where we left off. We just baked the textures in from the high poly to the low poly. Let's start creating some base materials on this now. So I'm not looking for making this look any good at the moment. I'm just setting things up. So I've just deleted the initial paint layer. I'm not going to create a fill layer. I'm going to call this main wood. And what I want to do with each of these is I want to put them inside groups. So we have our group folder here. We can click on that and drag it in. What I prefer to do is use the shortcut Control G. I'm going to call this wood group. And I'm just going to go this down, click this off, create the next one. This can be called something like rope. Again, let's put this inside a folder. Just click this off for a second. This can be my nails. I could do this by the type of material as well, so I could have wood, rope, metal. Excuse me. So let's do rope, nails, rope. Okay, again, I'll just switch this off. So what I'm going to do is put a very basic material on this. If you obviously want more materials, then just make more initial layers and more folders. So in the wood group, I'm going to go into this main wood, and I'm just going to give this an initial color, roughness, and metal, or rather lack of metal in this case. So I'm going to switch off the height and switch off the normal. Material wise, let's make this like a more orangey sort of brown color. Okay, let's just make sure we switch this on so we can see there. Maybe add a bit more yellow into this. I'm going to use materials other than this, but just to get an idea. Initially. I want this completely non-metal. And then roughness wise, I don't want it really shiny. I want this quite matte. Okay, so we've got something like that. If I switch my rope layer on and just go into this, then you see it overrides the other materials. So again with rope, I'm going to just set it to color, roughness and metal. Again, I want no metal. Roughness again, I probably want even less, to almost 0. The color is kind of like a yellowy orange again. Let's bring this down. Do it a bit lighter. Okay, and let's click on the nails. Go into this. We can have these silver or brass nails depending on what kind of look you want. So let's switch these two off. So this time I do want metallic on. And you see that's made everything metallic. I'm going to mask this out afterwards, but that's why I like to put the other layers as non-metallic. So it's setting all these base properties on everything. So we've got that. Roughness, I don't want it too shiny, but a little bit. And let's do like a brass nail. So everything's quite orange at the moment, but hopefully this will sort itself out. So something like that. Okay. So obviously it looks really weird at the moment. We need to start setting the masks for these things. So I'm going to start on this nails group right at the top. I'm going to right click, and as I said before, I can't actually, these aren't physical objects now. These are baked down detail wise. So that's why I created that color mask in Maya. So it's a vertex color, and I baked that down. If you remember on our bakes, we had this ID, which was a vertex color. Oops, return to painting mode. So what we can do is on our group, right click. I'm going to do a add mask with color selection. We're going to click on pick color, and then I can just click that out. So that's just setting that brass on there. If I alt click on this, I can actually see that. Now it's a little jagged. I can play around with the tolerance and bring this out a little bit. So we can play around with that a little bit. You've got to be careful that I'm not going over the wood. Sometimes what I like to do with this is just go in and add a filter. I'm going to add a blur filter. Bring that down, I'll bring that something like that. And then on top of that, let's add a levels. And on the levels, I'm going to bring these like a bit closer together. So it's just giving me a smoother look to this. So from that, tightening it up. Okay. We get a much smoother look to that. So the next one is a rope. Let's go into the rope one. Again, we've got this area. With a rope, I'm going to do it as, well, I can actually do it in two ways, but I'm going to use this tool over here. So let's just right click and let's add a black mask. And over here, I've got this polygon fill option. So I'm going to click on that. We can either use mesh fill or UV chunk fill. So if I just bring my UVs up, if I just press F1, this is my rope here. So it's either a separate mesh. So let's do one and then the other. So if I click on mesh fill, I can do it there. If I just show you that, you can see that's white. So I'm alt clicking here, by the way. And let's do the other one as a, to click on my mask. Let's do the other one as UV chunk. So I can click on that, click on that. So either way with this, if I hadn't had those UVs separated out into their own shell, then I could have just done that with my mesh fill. If this mesh was actually attached to this object, like it was welded in vertex wise, but my UVs were separated, then I can do that. But in this case, I could use one or the other. Okay. So that's got my rope on there. And actually my wood, I don't need to do anything with because that's all of the other bits. I've got a color ID on the inside of this if I did want to have these as separate types of wood. But for now, I'll just leave that as it is. And I'm just going to press F2 just to bring this back to just a 3D view. So we have F1 is our dual view, F2 is our 3D, F3 is just our UVs. So generally I'm working on this F2 viewport like this. Okay. So now I've got all those sorted out, we can start adding more texture to this and more detail. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the wood. So I can go in the wood. Now I could actually take one of these wood textures. So we have over here in our materials. If I type in wood, we've got a few different things. These are kind of stylized. You can try them by all means. I'm going to make my own from scratch. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to put some wood grain in. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this wood grain 01 because I may have a couple of different ones. With this, I just want height map. So I'm going to alt click on the height and that's going to just click this one on. And I'm going to take the height map down. This is just the amount. So if I push it down, it's going to push down into the mesh. If I take this up to a value of 1, it's going to push up from the mesh. And you'll see hopefully this in a second. So with this, I'm going to go in and add a mask. So I'm going to add a black mask. We're not going to get anything right away. But on the mask, I want to right click and we're going to add a fill on this. And if I go into my textures over here, I've still got my wood search field. So I've got a couple of things that we can do on this. We've got a couple of types of wood that I can go in and try. So I'm going to try this one actually. So I can just drag and drop this in. And we have this type of wood grain there. It's really strong at the minute. So a couple of things I want to do. The first thing, I'm going to go up to the top of this. I'm going to change projection from UV projection to triplanar. And that's going to separate out. It's going to change the rotation of this. So change the weights tiling around the object. I'm going to set the rotation of this to 90. So the wood grain's following along this way. Along the entire thing. And I'm going to change the strength of this down. So if I go back to my original material, rather than the actual the fill, if I go back to this, I'm going to go back to my height map, and to make this more subtle, I can bring this down. If I take this to 0, we're going to get nothing. If I take it up, it's going to push out, but with our wood grain, we want it pushed in. So we're going to get this effect like that. Okay. I probably want to tile this, so I'm going to go to my wood grain again, go to my mask, go into my wood grain, and then we have this tiling. Let's try tiling it by 2. That looks a little better. You can obviously play around with this a lot more than me. Let's try 3. So I'm looking at getting the right scale for the object. So it's about 1 meter long. Just getting the right kind of wood grain. You also may have different properties on your wood grain as well. So actually, if I just go into, let's set this back to 1. You don't want to set this to 0 because it'll have, let me just show you. It's going to have nothing. So let's set it to 1. So we do have a tiling amount down here as well. And sometimes that will create a better effect for you. Depends on the actual fill itself. We do have a seed. So I can go in and just randomize this. So if you don't like what it's doing, you can just play around with that to get different results. And we also have this balance and contrast. So I can bring the contrast up so we've actually got less of that wood grain. I can bring it down. In this particular instance, it's at 0, so I'm okay with that. And our balance, we're going to kind of create more strength on this, or actually flip that inside out. So I'll set that back to 0.5. It's default. That's fine. Okay. I could do another one of these as well. So I could go in and let's do another fill. Let's call this wood grain 2 or wood grain 02. So one of the things that you should try to do with Substance Paint is not do everything in one layer. You build up the detail in different layers. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm just going to solo out the height by alt-clicking on it. We're going to mask this. I'm going to right-click over the mask and add a fill. And then I could go in again to one of these. Let's try this one. So let's just switch this off for a second. Let's see what this one's doing. And I also need to go in and just make sure I bring that height down as well. So same thing as last time, UV projection. Let's do a triplanar. With the triplanar, I can also go in and I can scale this down a little bit and just have it outside so we can play around with this. So it's closer to the actual scale. Let's move this in. I am going to rotate this as well. So let's get our rotation and let's set that to 90 again. Did that do it? Yeah. Okay. And let's bring this up. And again, I can just take the strength of this down just by bringing this again to nothing. So it's just adding a bit more randomness onto the whole thing. And we can keep playing around with that. It's very shiny at the moment. So I'll need to deal with that. We're kind of seeing that shine a lot more as we're adding the wood grain to it. But I'm okay with that for a second. So I'm just going to go back to my main wood material. I'm going to go back to my roughness. I'm going to bring this roughness down. Okay, so straight away that's looking better. And I still think this wood grain's too much. So let's go back to my initial wood grain here. Let's just bring this down a bit. And another thing we can do, if I go into the wood grain itself and the grunge, we can actually make it more subtle like this as well, just by bringing that down. So it depends on the look you want. Okay, let's go with that. So the next thing I want to do is add some variation to the color of this. So I've just got a picture over here. Let's see if this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this. I'm going to duplicate this color. And with this one, I just want the color. So I'm going to switch these two off. So I'm going to use my, let me just go in here and just bring this to the side for a second. I'm going to use my color picker and I'm going to come over here and pick a different color. And let's just full screen that again. Okay. So let me just call this call var 01. Right click on this and let's add a mask. And then we can go in with our layers again and use anything as a mask. So I'm going to try one of these wood ones again. Let's drag this one in. So let's grab this mask, let's right click and let's add a fill again. And let's drag this in. Let's get that rotated. I'm just going to leave it. I'll try it on the UV projection for a second. So let's go into the rotation. Yeah, you see the wood grain's the wrong way that way. So let's go on to that triplanar. Let me just again bring this down. Okay, you see, actually we're affecting the way that this is basing it over it, but see, that's a lot better now. We've actually got some variation in the wood grain there. Okay. I can still tile this, so we can still go in and set our tiling amount, depending on what we want. Just be careful with the tiling that it's not looking too obvious in terms of it. And with this now, I could go in and we could, again, just blend this down a little bit. Because I want to build up that detail bit by bit. So I'm going to do the same with a darker color. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to go to, let's just click over here. Got my image again. My color, let's go into the color picker and I'm going to click this darker area. That over. It's just auto saving a second. Let me just pause this. Right, just making sure it doesn't crash. Okay, so I'm going to go into the mask, go into my grunge. I'm going to just try to invert this second. Okay, yeah, not bothered about that. We could play around with the contrast again as well. Could play around with the balance. I actually want this to be darker anyway, so let's just click on this color. And let's bring this down. And I think I'll just do another fill. So what I can do is go in. I can actually get rid of this mask. So we can right click now and add another fill. And let's try something else now. Let's try this one. Okay. Again, let's just go in. I'll try doing a triplanar again. I think I actually like the UV projection on this. Let's have a look when it's rotated. Yep, I quite like that. Okay. Let's just show you. Switch it on and off to see what it's doing as well. So I quite like the build-up of that. Let's just try with a contrast. So you see what that's doing? That's making it darker just in more obvious places. So I'll leave that down. Balance again, I can bring this up or down more. Again, I think I'm happy with that. Okay. I'm going to start to add some variation to the roughness here as well. So on this particular layer, I'm going to go back where it's got darker areas. I'm going to click on roughness, and I'm going to take some of this roughness down. If I take that up to make it really shiny, you can kind of see in those areas that are masked, it's more shiny. But I want this to be a bit rougher, so I'm going to bring this down, and we should have some variation in that. And what I may do is the opposite with a lighter wood. So let's go in here, let's add roughness to it, and let's make that a little shinier. I don't want it too shiny, but just so it's got a little bit of specularity, or a little bit of reflectiveness on that. So I've got something like that. Okay. And if we want to, we can always go in and we can play around with the blending on these. Okay. If I was to look at my reference, sometimes you get a bit of red in this wood as well, or a bit more yellow. Depending on the kind of wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a fill on this. Just add colour. I'm going to go in, let's just alt click on that, sorry. So we've got colour. I'm going to go in and actually just make a yellow. Let's make a more saturated yellow. Don't want it too greeny. Okay, over the top. And I call this colour var 03. Right click, add a mask. Right click, add a fill. And then I'm just going to go in and get a grunge. Now I want this yellow to go over. I actually use this one quite a lot, this grunge concrete old. Let's just try that one. Sometimes it's just experimenting with the masks themselves. So I quite like that, but I'm going to go in. I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. Just giving the wood a bit of age. Okay. And you can just keep going with this. You can keep going with the colour variation and things like the roughness variation to your heart's content. So just a final couple of things with the wood. I'm going to add some edge wear on this. So along the different planks. So the way that this works is actually if you've baked down the curvature, this works really nicely with it. So let me add another layer. I call this edge wear. I'm going to leave this white for now, and I'm just going to add colour, so alt-click on this, just so we can see it, and then we may add the roughness into it afterwards. So right-click, black mask again, but this time I'm going to right-click over my mask, and I'm going to add a generator. If I click on the generator itself, I'm going to use this metal edge wear. Now it says metal edge wear, it doesn't matter, we can use this for wood as well. So click on that. What it does is it goes in, and it finds all the curvature maps which find the edges of it, and it just makes a mask around that. So just to show you the mask, there we go. The white areas is what's showing, the black areas it's transparent. Look back on there. And with this now, I can do a couple of things, but what I like to do is just go in with my colour, pick a colour around it, which obviously makes it disappear, but then bring this a bit lighter. So we can make it a bit more subtle that way. Got that kind of thing. If you want to blend it down even more, we can go in and we can blend this. And just make it a bit more subtle. Again, sometimes you just don't want it too strong. And there's a lot you can do with this metal edge wear. So you can go in. Let me just set it to the full amount again. We can go in and we can change quite a few things. So we can change the amount of wear on it. And go right in and completely obliterate it. We can change the wear contrast. I can bring that down. I can bring that up. Triplanar again sometimes works better. Grunge amount is something that I often change, and generally I find that bringing it smaller, if you're working on something real scale, works a little better. If you take it up too high, you start to see tiling on it. So I'll bring that down a little bit. Grunge amount, again, just kind of brings that out. So I'm going to go something like that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a similar process for the rope, but I won't go through that because I'm using exactly the same principles. So I'll just pause it here, or I'll stop the video here and then come back and we'll have the rope done. Let me bring this up. So you can see all of the things we've done on the wood grain here. I've not just got one layer, I've got all these different ones. So actually, before I do the rope, let's just switch these off. So that's what we started out with. We're in color variation, color variation, color variation. We're adding our edge wear. We're adding in some wood grain, and we're adding some more wood grain. And we get a much more interesting look to our crate.